Welcome to this Imbolc 2024 Rune Reading, covering the period from the 1st of February to the spring equinox on the 21st of March. So I'm just going to share my screen with you now. Let me just do that. Make it bigger. There we are. So here we are. So as we all know, we are in quite troubled and turbulent times at the moment. And those of you that saw my reading for the year 2024, you will know that I talked about this trajectory that we're on, that we've been on for a little while, of seemingly growing turbulence, growing conflict in the world, increasing kind of embroilment in existing conflicts, increasing complexity that I didn't feel would start to ease until we are closer to Easter, when there seems to be some easement and the pattern is not growing at that time. But of course, there is so much that can only be sorted out over time. So when I drew these runes, I didn't exactly expect everything to be sweetness and light, but the rune on the right in the image is actually very positive. So that, was a big bonus. But to come to the runes that we have here, we have Lagos or Lurga on the left. It's orientated towards the right, which reminds us that we do need to work on managing our emotions. This reading, is for people collectively. It concerns general themes that are out there in the world and how we respond to those. So with the turbulence that is around, and I do see February as possibly the most turbulent month this year, although March is a little bit back. March is very similar, but then there's a starting of the turning of the tide away from an increase in turbulence. So to come back to this rune, it really does encourage us to remember that our emotions are like the tide. They are passing through. It is an ocean of emotion. And whilst we do need to respond and process what is going on for our own well-being, and there's certainly a lot to process, and we have to be the judges of the speed at which we can process, and when we need to take a step back and go into the peace, go into the silence, go into the beauty of nature, or whatever it is that gives us comfort, gives us a sense of respite, because we can't live that kind of intensity and, in a good way, in a positive way, without doing that. And we must never feel, that we are not deserving of taking that step back, because not taking it usually does not ease anything for our spiritual brothers and sisters that are existing in very difficult circumstances. Of course, if we're in an immediate situation and we are able to help, whilst that too is a judgment call, we can, feel slightly different about that usually. But to come to the central rune, which I really feel is the crux of the matter, as what we are processing in a major way at the moment, although of course individuals are too, we have Uras or Ur, and it's in the upside down position. When it is upright, when it, it looks a little bit like an angular letter N in the upright position, then it talks about resources, structure in a positive way. This is talking about structure in a way that structures that need to change, need to come apart, or are being shown up for what they are and they need, they need to change, or something else needs to be put in their place, which we know that in terms of the structures that we have in the world for handling life, that it can be slow moving to get them to change. And yet, this rune is promising really that change will be worked towards. Change will be coming, but it will take a while to come. So I'm not saying that that is coming with, before the spring equinox, or even this year, or maybe next year, but it's starting. The process is starting. The process that leads to progress is starting. And we should remember that when we see, turbulence that is slightly more than what we have at the moment. And, let's face it, there is a lot of it in different places, and we all feel quite concerned about that. But what this is saying is there is a process, there is progress. It's not as we would want it to be by any means, but there is the start of something new. So that is very good to think about. On the right-hand side here, we have fair, or Fehu as it is known, and it is in its upright position when it's about the resources and the talents that we've got at our disposal. And it reminds us that there is a way to be equal to the tasks. It's going to take us a while to find it. It's going to take, a bit of to-ing and fro-ing to get to that point. It's going to take a bit of bit of disagreement, discord. There is, I feel, quite a lot of that around, both in February and in March, where we're seeing it's not just the conflicts that we see in a major way, and particularly the Middle East, where I feel there is, for a short time, increased embroilment, increased complexity. But it really does show us how the structures that are there that we are trying to use, how they are not working. And it's a very good thing to, have shown up clearly when things are not working, because it does at least open the doorway to people thinking and to demands for what can we do better? How can we do this better? And Fehu is absolutely promising. There are things you can do better, and is very encouraging that that is what we are starting to progress with. Of course, it does take time before we see the end results of it. It can take years to see the kind of major changes that are probably necessary, but we can see something starting, a difference in attitude, a difference in approach, a difference in what people express that they feel is tolerable, is not tolerable. All of those things are changing. So whilst we will look out at the world and see increased turbulence, increased uprising, increased things that are not working, increased discord within countries, sometimes between countries, in existing conflicts, in economic situations in many countries. And I'm particularly looking at South America here, but there are other countries that I feel will be touched by that, where we would say, well, the system's there, it's just, in a way, failing is the best word I can use, but failing sometimes is necessary before there is a better starting point, because that is shown here. And in a personal reading, if I had Uras in this position and Fehu in this position, it would be telling me that the existing structure, is not working. The person concerned would do well to look at, they're encouraged to look at how they can move on from that, how they can perhaps alter it in radical ways, or maybe even leave it totally behind. But Fehu is saying you have the things at your disposal that you need, which includes the talents, which includes people who will, at the right time, be willing to work together, who maybe at the moment They are not willing to work together, but there's a willingness here to work together to build something new, to build something different. It isn't necessarily about, you know, building a house on the same foundations. Very certainly not. It is about, in many ways, rejigging those foundations before you start building, maybe on the same piece of land, maybe not. And I'm using that metaphorically. Obviously, if a country wants to rebuild one of its structures or its financial structure, whilst other countries can help, it has to do it on its own turf, so to speak. But I'm using that as a metaphor, that we're talking about not just the foundation, but the deeper levels below the foundation that supports the foundations in many instances. So as I'm looking at this, there is hope on the horizon. It is not, you know, it's certainly not a smooth time, not by any stretch of the imagination, but it is, or should be, leading us to a point where we will say that, be able to say that something else, you know, is starting in a good way, that will take time to progress, but let's face it, most worthwhile things do, don't they? So there is both what we don't want to hear here, more of the same and a little bit more, but also what we do want to hear, that there are ways forward, rather, and we will get to them in a little time, rather than simply feeling that just everything is more and more falling apart. There is a process that leads to progress within that falling apart, and we should be encouraged and heartened by that, is very much the message within this reading. Coming back to my reading for 2024, I had a feeling that was like, or an image that was like a chick, Easter chick breaking out of an egg. And whilst we see so much around us fragmenting, then what is happening is it's the equivalent of the eggshell breaking and the chick starting to break out. Of course, that little chick has got to grow into a great big bird. But what we're saying here is, or what I'm saying here is, also around the Easter time, that is important. And Easter is early this year. Easter is in March this year. So right at the end of March, but it is in March. And I feel that by then there are some little whispers that are coming forwards that feel more positive in our everyday world. But still, you know, it's not a smooth year, but better is what I am saying here. So with those thoughts, I will wish you a happy Imbolc, or 1st of February, or Candlemas, or very, very early spring, however you like to think about it. I do offer personal readings, both rune readings for insight and just to look at a little bit at your potential pathway at the moment. And I also offer mediumship readings where I communicate with the ancestors who give some evidence of who they are. I can never promise that any particular person will communicate, but they love to come, they love to encourage us, to give us love, to share memories, usually ones that are happy or humorous, or maybe just to let us know that they're thinking of us and have been aware of our everyday lives. So thank you for joining me, and I look forward to you joining again soon, if that is what you would like to do.